Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to yet to another conversation on the importance of reading Srila Prabhupada's books. My name is Krishna Prem Rupa Das. I'm serving here at ISKCON Zurich, and we are conducting these talks on behalf of the ISKCON Ministry of Education. And today we are very fortunate to have the association of His Holiness Atmanivedana Maharaj. Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for being with us. His Holiness Atmanivedana Maharaj is actually originally has a Gujarati origin from India, but was born in Uganda in Africa, and got to know the devotees in the UK, in London, and joined the movement in 1979. And the first couple of years, Maharaj lived and preached in England. And then in the early 80s, Maharaj spent about, I think, 5 years at New Vrindavan. And then later on received sannyas initiation from His Holiness Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj in the year 1903. And since that time, Maharaj preaching to the academic circle and to the scientific circle, and has been very active preaching in different places, traveling, is based at the Bhaktivedanta Manor in London, and also traveled in Europe, in Asia, in Bali, and in India. And yeah, thank you so much, Maharaj, for giving your time to us. And maybe the first question I would like to ask you, we mentioned that you met the devotees in 79 in the UK. What was the first contact with devotees, or how did you receive your first book of Srila Prabhupada, and what had its impact in your life?
Well, it was not 79. 79 is the year I joined the ashram.
Okay.
In a manner. But it was in 1975. As a school student, I was on my way home from school in Wembley High Street. And there were some devotees distributing books there. So there was one Western devotee. He saw me and he approached me and said, Are you Hindu? I sarcastically said, what do you think? No? So I said, yes, of course I'm a Hindu. And said, oh, it's very nice. I have got this book for you. I said, yes, what kind of book? He showed me a book and he said, take this book. It will tell you more about Hindu religion. So I was a bit sarcastic also at the time. I said, look, my dear friend, you're a white person. I'm a brown person. I'm a born Hindu. I don't think this book will tell me anything more about my religion and what I have learned from my parents and our tradition. So he kept insisting on me taking the book. And for almost 100 meters, he was following me. And finally, I got frustrated. I said, look, what do you want? He said, well, we are giving these books out and asking for a little donation. So you're asking for money. So at that time, I had what we had in England, £1 notes. That time we didn't have any coins, so we had £1 notes. So I gave him £1 note from my pocket. It was my dinner money. Every Monday we have to pay money to the school for our lunches there. Anyway, that was my dinner money. I said, okay, here, take £1. I gave him £1, and I started walking, and then he kept following me again. I said, no. You have given me some donation. Our spiritual master says, if anybody gives some donation, you must give him a book. So I said, look, I don't want this book. I gave you some money, no? Be happy with that. He said, no. Our guru said we must give you a book. So then he insisted me taking the book. So I took the book and went home. And for almost 6-7 months, that book was just lying in the living room. And one evening, happened to be a Monday evening. Of course, we didn't have any cable TV those days, just BBC and ITV. And television on a Monday evening is not very exciting. So I was watching TV and there's nothing exciting happening around 9 o'clock-ish. After the 9 o'clock news, then there is some documentary or something on a Monday evening. So I was watching that. It was very interesting. So then I looked at the book. I said, what is this interesting? Let me see this book. I picked the book up and I started reading it. And I started reading it, page after page after page. It was quite interesting. So I read the whole book. And by the time I finished the whole book, it was like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. I did not know that it took me that long because it was so interesting. I was so absorbed in the book. The time just went past. And around 6, my mom came into the living room and said, "So, what do you want for breakfast? Tea or coffee?" I said, "What do you mean tea or coffee? I haven't gone to sleep yet, Mom." I said, No. No sleeping business now. Get ready. Go and have your shower. Get ready. Take your breakfast and go to school. So I said, "Oh, my God. No sleep for a whole night." But anyway, because the absorption was so interesting in reading the book that it gave me so much insight into Krishna consciousness. Not as my perception of what Hinduism is, but what Prabhupada had presented. And incidentally, this book was Sri Ishopanishad. When I read the Sri Ishopanishad, and of course, in the purpose that Prabhupada mentioned there about the 4 regulatory principles, and he's saying drinking tea and coffee is also intoxicant. And then I told my mom, no tea, no coffee from now on. This Swamiji is saying in this book is intoxication. So I should not take this. And my mother was shocked because as far as I can remember, I stopped drinking milk. I don't know how far back in my childhood. I never drank milk. Maybe as a baby, my mother used to feed me milk is fine. But as far as I can remember, I stopped drinking milk. And milk was not my favorite drink, you can say. So I told my mother, yes, I will take some masala milk. She was shocked because for a person like me, who is used to drinking about 8 to 10 cups of tea or coffee a day, and that's in a whole day, from morning till evening, sipping teas and coffees, my mother was a little shocked. And anyway, so that is what inspired me to give up tea and coffee. And then I was reading Prabhupada's books. And it happened to be that my friend, a school colleague, Shruti Dharma Prabhu, of course, is no more now. He was temple president here at the manor. Him and we were in the same school. We joined the school same time. So we were friends. And he told me that the previous evening, some devotees had visited his house and made his father a life member and left a bunch of books in their home. So we were discussing these Prabhupada books. We got so interested that we said, we should look into this. So we started going to Berry Place in central London, connecting with devotees. And gradually, we got interested in Krishna consciousness and thinking that, okay, our life is meant for serving Srila Prabhupada. So at some stage, we should join the mission. Of course, at those times, as I said, we were school kids, so we were not very, very old that we could just move into a temple. There were some rules that you have to be 18 plus or something before you move into the temple, because they had some other incidents prior that younger people joined, and it was not a good experience for ISKCON society. Anyway, I don't need to get into that, but the point is that at that point in 1975, when I received the book, it did not change my life straight away. But 6 months later, somehow, by Krishna's arrangement in my heart, Paramatma says, read this book. And of course, as I said, I read the book, and that was the beginning of my spiritual awakening in Krishna consciousness.
Prabhupada used the term of time bomb, that these books are time bomb. So it seems that in your case, the bomb blew up after 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, there are incidents where people have received books and they're in their homes for maybe a few years before they get to see the book and read the book. And I think that everything has its appropriate time. Just like in Isopanishad, it says, Isyavasa idam sarvam, that there's a quota set aside for everyone, and everything will come at the right time, not before or not after, at the appropriate time. Even though you may wish that something comes quickly. The example is you sow some seeds and then expect the seeds to grow immediately. It won't. It will grow in its own time. No matter how much watering you do, it will not speed up the process. But when the seeds grow, sprout, and then flower and give fruit, that will be given by its own time. So similarly, our Krishna consciousness or Krishna consciousness awakening is, I think, predestined by the Lord's arrangement, that when an individual will awaken to spirituality. But as Prabhupada says, that our business in this ISKCON Hare Krishna movement is to preach. And the best way to preach is, of course, that receiving these transcendental books. These books are a dynamic source of knowledge which will open the heart and reveal the truth of one's existence and what path one should follow. And we have many examples. In fact, sometimes when I'm giving class and I emphasize on reading Prabhupada books, I said these books are so important that it will change people's lives. And for us, it's most important that we distribute these books, because I may speak to someone for 5, 10 minutes, even an hour, but that hearing will be just temporarily there in his mind and then it will go. The book will always be there. And Prabhupada said these books are not different from the Supreme Lord himself. So the Lord himself and his books or subject matter describes his personality, his qualities, his pastimes are non different, and therefore they are as good as the Supreme Lord. And associating with that book is associated with the Supreme. And the more and more we associate these books, the more and more we are directly in connection with the Supreme Lord, and our purification of the heart takes place. And as I said, that spiritual awakening happens. And there are many times I give example that if we go to every individual devotee in ISKCON society all over the world and ask them how they came to Krishna consciousness, I'm sure you can write one book per person. That many books we can write about the experience of how they came to Krishna consciousness. So it is very revealing that these books are of utmost importance.
We also, Srila Prabhupada himself actually mentioned that he would forever continue to live in his books because Prabhupada gave so much, invested so much in writing his Bhaktivedanta purports. Would you maybe like to share some insights in how we as devotees, especially for us who maybe have not met Prabhupada personally, but just by reading Prabhupada's books, not only we get the knowledge, Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, but we also actually get a chance to associate with Prabhupada. Do we have some realization on that or some thoughts on this?
Yes, I mean, as I said, that these books, as Srila Prabhupada mentions, that they are transcendental words describing the Supreme Lord. And therefore, they are not different from the Supreme Lord. At the same time, I look at it from this perspective, that the words which Srila Prabhupada has written as the famous A.C. Bhaktivedana Swami Prabhupada purports are also non-different from Prabhupada. Prabhupada is a living person. Unfortunately, we think that Prabhupada is just like us, but he is not. He is a transcendental personality. He came into the spiritual world, rather he came from the spiritual world to this material world to establish the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And therefore, he is a very, very special person. And every word he speaks, every word he writes is actually non-different from him. And therefore, those who are not fortunate enough to have met him personally, then the Bhaktivedanta purport is that when you read this purpose, Prabhupada is directly speaking to you. You are directly associating with him. And the impact of that is there. And those who have actually read Srila Prabhupada's books will have this experience that when they're reading this purpose, it is actually Prabhupada speaking to them physically. Although we cannot experience his physical presence, but in the spiritual context, he's there, alive in his words. And therefore, when we read those words, it makes a lot of impact on us. And that means that we are directly associating with the Supreme Lord and his pure devotee. And that is a perfect formula for our purification and our spiritual awakening. Because when you have the two most important ingredients in awakening a sleeping soul, the Supreme Lord himself and, of course, his pure devotee, then it is, as I said, a perfect ingredients to awaken us. And Prabhupada, we must understand that when he came to America in 1965, he was 70 years old. And he began his mission in 1976. And in 1977, he departed. So in a short period of 10 to 11 years, he established all this literature for us. And that was the time when he actually interacted with many, many disciples of his. Prior to that, he was just, I suppose, meditating on the Supreme Lord, as we read in the Bhagavatam, that when creation was manifested from the pores of the Mahavishnu. And from that, Garbhodaksha ocean was there, and then Garbhodaksha Vishnu came. From his navel, lotus flower came, and on lotus flower, Brahma came. And then Brahma was sitting there for thousands of years, meditating. What is his duty? And in his maturity, Krishna gives him inspiration and gives him the 4 Vedas. And then he starts creating. So for me, I see Prabhupada like that Prabhupada came in this world, and up to the age of 70, he was there in Vrindavan. Of course, not all 70 years of his life, but in his maturity of his retirement, he came to Vrindavan, took shelter of the Holy Dham. And in the Holy Dham, he was meditating on his spiritual master and getting inspiration from his spiritual master to embark on this unique mission to spread the words and teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when appropriate time came, Srila Prabhupada said, okay, now's the time. Everything is perfect. Situation is just right. Let me go and take this mission to the world. And of course, Prabhupada came, and then he spent his time nurturing new people who are completely novice in the culture of Krishna consciousness. He nurtured them. He developed their spiritual awakening. At the same time, he was writing so many books. So he was tremendously concentrating on establishing the very strong foundation of the spiritual movement, which is going to last for thousands of years in the future, because this is the Lord's mission. And Srila Prabhupada has given us these fundamental principles of Krishna consciousness in his books. And therefore, these books are non-different from him. And if you read these books, my personal experience is that every time I pick up a Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam and read the purports, I feel I'm sitting right there in the room with Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maharaj, for explaining that so beautifully. Considering that actually Prabhupada gave so much stress on the importance of his books, distributing his books, as well as studying and reading his books, how would you explain that nowadays we see that it seems that many devotees are actually not regularly reading Srila Prabhupada's books? What do you think is a reason for that?
Well, I see the reason, maybe there's complacency in one's life, thinking, oh, now I'm a devotee, I know a little bit of knowledge, I've read a little bit, and I'm now a devotee. So therefore, I don't really need to read the book. But actually, if you go back to the Bhagavatam itself, which is the fundamental principle of Bhagavad Dharma, given to us by Vedavyas, and is coming in the Paramparic line, as Srila Prabhupada established it, and his Bhagavatam purports. In the first canto of Bhagavatam, Vedavyas says, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, that every day, regularly, one must read Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the instruction of Vedavyas. And Prabhupada is just emphasizing in the Paramparic line that you must all read this book regularly, because there is a saying in English, out of sight, out of mind. So if you're not associated with the book every day, then it is out of sight and out of mind, and therefore you will not get the benefit. On the other hand, when we are a spiritual awakened and become a devotee of Krishna and start practicing the disciplines of bhakti as per the instructions given in the scriptures and directions given by the acharyas, the spiritual masters, then I say we are not a devotee yet, but we are what is described as a student or a practicing devotee. So we have just got entrance into the school of devotion. So as you enter in the school of devotion, every day you have to study just like in ordinary school and college. When you get entrance into school, you go to study. Then you go to finish your school. And when you finish your school and you are successful there, then you get entrance into the college. And when you go into the college, you go to study till you get a certificate. And after getting the certificate that you have graduated, you still have to keep up with the new technology, new knowledge which is coming in the field of your expertise. I was talking to one doctor the other day, and he said, I'm 65 years old. I've been practicing medicine, but I still have to read these books on medical journals and medical papers which are coming out, showing new technology, new insight into the world of medicine. And I'm still a student at 65. So can you imagine that this is materially speaking, or to speak of spiritually? So we are in the school of devotion. Every day we should read. We should not take it for granted because, as I said, out of sight, out of mind, and very quickly we can become forgetful of our actual position and mission of our life. And our mission of life is to become perfect as a devotee. And there are many, many wonderful examples of perfect devotees in the scriptures. We should be in that category. Unless until we can relate that, yes, I have reached this standard, then we are not yet a devotee. We are practicing devotee. And therefore, it is very important to regularly read these books, which Prabhupada made a lot of effort to present to us. He spent every moment of his time from 1966 to 1977, even to the point where he was in his bed in Vrindavan in his last few days on this world, and he would say, please bring the dictaphone. And he would ask one of his scholarly devotees to read the Sanskrit from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and then Prabhupada would translate. Even at that point, he's so concerned that I want to give you everything possible required to become perfect devotees. And therefore, if we as devotees have any appreciation for Srila Prabhupada, then we must read these books, because that is the only way we can show our gratitude and our indebtedness to Srila Prabhupada, by reading his books. Otherwise, we will just be a devotee, but we will not become perfect in our mission to go back to the spiritual world. And we will lack all this wonderful experience from Prabhupada's books, which is going to make us perfect devotees. So we should not become complacent. It must be emphasized, Nityam Bhagavata Seva, every day, every moment, we should read. And more we read, the more we connect with the Supreme, and therefore we are kept out of the three modes of material nature, which is very influential in this material world. And very easily we can be dragged away, just like Prabhupada gives example that on the ocean shore, if you go too deep into the ocean, the waves will be so powerful that even if you are the best swimmer, can drag you away into the depth of the ocean. So we are in this material world is considered like the ocean of material existence. And we are in this ocean. We are trying to stay afloat. And what is our instrument that keeps us afloat is the Bhagavatam, is these books. We are attached to these books. It is like that we have the buoyant, I don't know what it's called, but it saves us from sinking. And if we have these books, then we will not sink or be dragged into the waves or depth of this ocean material existence. And we will float, and eventually, of course, perfection will be there. So these books are our floating ingredient, which makes us float and not sink in the material world.
I think there's two very beautiful points that you mentioned, Maharaj, that, just out of gratitude, considering how much Prabhupada invested into this book, so out of gratitude, it's our duty to actually take advantage of his, rich knowledge and the wisdom that Prabhupada gave us. And as you mentioned, in order to keep us spiritually strong, it is very important to sharpen our intelligence with hearing and reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Maharaj, what do you think let's say that from now on, every ISKCON member would start to actually read, like every day, at least an hour with reading Srila Prabhupada's books. So how would be ISKCON different in about, let's say, 5 years, 10 years from now? How would ISKCON be different if everyone actually would read Prabhupada's books? What do you think?
Well, if every single member who has joined, a new person who's just joined the family of Krishna consciousness, or someone who's been here for more than 40, 50 years, each and every one of us, if we read Srila Prabhupada's books every day, at least minimum 1 hour, then you will see the difference in the potency of Krishna consciousness mission. Because every one of us are showing our gratitude of what we received as Krishna consciousness and spiritual awakening. And therefore, we are preaching to others to enlighten them that please come to Krishna consciousness. Please awaken from this slumber of darkness. What will happen is the potency of every single individual and collective potency of our mission be so powerful that within a short time, we can actually awaken many, many sleeping souls. And the world will become very dynamic because then everybody will be spiritually awakened. And Prabhupada says, if everybody becomes spiritually awakened, then this material world will have a complete transformation from the material realm to the Vaikuntha realm. Even though it is still material, but it will have the material Vaikuntha spirit. And I feel very strongly that if every member of ISKCON reads Srila Prabhupada's books, they will be empowered by the potency of spiritual strength. And then when they speak, they will have potency to preach and change the other person's heart. And if collectively, if we do this, then there will be tremendous potency within our movement to make difference in people's lives, that they will change for the better.
So actually, by absorbing spiritual wisdom ourselves, we will be able to, get empowered to actually share that wisdom.
Yes, because see, if you have something, you can give someone. But if you are lacking, what can you give? You can at most you can give is whatever little you have. But spiritual knowledge is so depth in its knowledge of quantity, you can say, if you want to quantify, it is unlimited. And therefore, we have to get these resources into us so that we can give it out. You can give out as much as you have. So more and more you read, the more and more you have to give. The more and more you give, the more and more it will have benefit for everyone. So we as individuals must become very, very greedy, get more and more, so that we can distribute more.
It's an interesting word you used, Maharaj, greedy. I think Narottam Das Thakur mentioned that greed, the lobha, can be engaged in Krishna consciousness by becoming greedy for sadhu sangha and harikatha. So,
yes, I mean, in the scripture we read kama, krodha, moha, lobha, all these qualities, kama, lust, moha, desire for having more, greed, anger, all these are material qualities. But if rightly channeled in a proper way, then they can be utilized in a spiritual context. So we can become greedy for Krishna. Even if he needs to be, we can become angry for Krishna. As Krishna was inciting Arjuna, come on, Arjuna, get angry. Go to fight a war. You cannot fight a war sitting peacefully. You got to get that mind agitated to go and fight. So Krishna says that anger can be used for the right purpose, not for the wrong purpose. So if we are properly trained, as I said, these books are so much dynamic. It's the basis of our knowledge, that we have the tool of this knowledge, then every aspect of our material existence can be used in Krishna consciousness.
And Maharaj, what would you advise us? How can we develop such greediness or such, let's say, like eagerness to actually hear more about Krishna, read more? How do we, if someone doesn't feel so much inspiration to read, how to develop that eagerness?
Well, you see, one thing is that, if you don't have your own, inner desire, then nobody can help you. But there is one thing which can help you, and that Srila Prabhupada says, you associate with the right kind of people whose minds are absorbed. And if you're absorbed with those who are reading Prabhupada's books and getting a lot of inspiration from his books, then by your own personality, you can introduce or induce the other person to become equally enthusiastic, because your enthusiasm will be so overpowering that the other person will also get that inspiration. So that is why he said you associate with like-minded people who are interested in this subject matter. And when you associate with people, then you will automatically get enthusiastic about reading Prabhupada's books. There's no doubt about it. But we must associate with the right people.
That's one reason why we conduct these interviews, so to give people, devotees in general, a chance to hear from exalted Vaishnavas like you could self. Now, how some devotees, they mention how they face a lot of obstacles in reading, in the reading practice, whether it's a lack of time, or they are distracted when they read, or they don't find the taste, or they feel tired while reading. Would you like to give us some practical tips? I don't know, your personal reading sadhana, do you have a specific time you read, or how do you deal with such obstacles, or what would you advise us to overcome them?
Well, one way is I was one time in Spain with Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. And just it was him and me just sitting on the hills at our new Braj Mandal farm just outside Madrid. And he said, "This is so peaceful, very nice." And then he just turned around to me and saying, "Atmanivedana, you should write a commentary on Vedanta Sutra." And I said, "What? I am not even qualified to write anything spiritual. What are you saying, Maharaj?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "Why? Because if you write a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, and this is not for publishing or for making a publication that here it is, a great saintly person has written a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. No, this is for your own personal purification." And because he said that if you're writing a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, then you have to study the Vedanta Sutra. And if you study the Vedanta Sutras, then you will be able to write on it. So in a similar way, I would say to all devotees, if you don't get inspired to read a book, then what you do is you sit down and say, make a mission in your life. I am going to write a commentary on Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam. And you sit down. And then when you have to write something, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, then you got to read those verses to understand what you're writing. And obviously, nobody wants to become addressed as a fool. If you write something which doesn't make sense, then obviously someone reads your writing and says, "Oh, what is this garbage you're writing?" And it will be an insult to you and blow to your ego. Nobody likes that. Because everyone has an ego saying, "Yes, I want to be honored and respected." So if you write something which makes sense, so therefore you have to read the books and make it a mission. Like, for example, myself, I make PowerPoint presentations about different subjects. Not that I'm going to use this for anybody, but it's a hobby I have. So I use computer, I have my PowerPoint presentations, and then I make PowerPoint presentation on different subjects. And all those different subject matters which I have to make a PowerPoint presentation of, I have to go into Prabhupada's books and extract some information and then compile it in a way which is nicely presentable. And then when I see my PowerPoint presentation, I feel satisfied. Yes, this makes a lot of sense. But to get a nice PowerPoint presentation, which will make sense not just to me, but any individual who sees that presentation, it will make sense to that person, means I have to dive into the books, extract all the material I require. So if you kind of go down that path, which Sripad Maharaj told me, I write a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, so I write a commentary on Prabhupada's books, not for publication, for two reasons. One, that if you read Prabhupada's books to get this information for your commentaries you're writing or essays you're writing, then you will have to go into the books to get information, extract the information. And while doing that, the transcendental purification will take place of the heart. And the more and more purification of the heart takes place, the more and more you want to read, because then automatically that inspiration comes. And if you get the bug for it, then you will then never stop. But you got to start there somewhere. So I would say in the initial stage, every devotee should sit down, say, look, I will write at least one essay on one subject matter. And that essay should not be like one page, but it should be like, 10, 15 pages of your essay, pretty long one. And to do justice to that and to write material about that for 10, 15 pages of essay, you got to read the books. And once you start reading the books, it is like something which is an acquired taste. See, even like, say, in a material context, some cuisine, first time someone introduced you to some foreign food which you have never seen or heard of, and you try it out and say, well, it's okay. But then more and more you try, you develop a taste for it. And eventually, you develop so much taste that you just want it every time. But prior to that, you had no access to it, no knowledge of it. But now that you have acquired taste for it, you want more and more and more. And anytime says, Prabhu, do you want this? Yeah, yes. Why? Because you have now acquired taste for it. So similarly, when we read the books, beginning, it may not be very, very tasteful. As Prabhupada says, in the beginning, everything is bitter. But as you start relishing it, it becomes sweeter and sweeter. So it is like, my experience is, material life is bitter in the beginning and sweet at the end because you have not connected with Krishna. On the other hand, material life in the material realm is very sweet in the beginning, but bitter end because old age, disease, and death comes. So it depends on how you see it. So similarly, these books, you have to acquire taste for it. And when you develop taste, it becomes sweeter and sweeter. And naturally, the impact of reading Prabhupada's books or spiritual subject matter is such that it purifies the heart. The more and more the heart gets purified, the more and more you want to be attracted to this kind of knowledge, because that is the natural effect of reading Prabhupada's books.
Yeah, you made several very important points that, so you suggest not just casual reading, but actually an active reading where we try to reflect on what we have read, and you even suggest to write in order to make it more, make it more alive. And you also spoke about how we need to develop a taste for it. And I think everyone who reads on a daily basis will agree that the more you read, the more you actually gain a taste. And at some point there is nobody has to tell you have to read, but actually you feel a strong desire. I want to read. I have not read today. I need to read, right?
Yeah, that's because you see, the transcendental nature of these books is such that the more you read, the more purification of the heart takes place. And the heart is become more and more purified. Then that means all the coverings which are covering the soul is creating a curtain where it cannot go beyond. But when the soul is clear of all these misgivings by reading the purification process, then the soul naturally develops its natural constitutional position. And Prabhupada said the natural position of the soul is to be with the Supreme Lord. And therefore, as you are reading these books, more and more purification takes place, the soul becomes free from this contamination, and the desire to be with the Supreme Lord gets more and more. And just like in the material world, if you have some kind of affection for a person, and you develop some attachment to that person, but then there's some separation from that person, and someone says, "Oh, I met this person just 2 weeks ago." You say, "Do you really? Can you tell me more? What was he doing? How is he doing?" You want to inquire about that person. Why? Because you have developed attachment for that person. So similarly, when we read these books, when the soul becomes purified of all this contamination, it wants to know more about the Lord. And where you can get more knowledge about the Lord is, of course, these transcendental books. And these books are not just literatures. They are revealing books. They give you revelation. The more you read, every time you read, some new revelation comes, because these are living books. These are not some dead novel. People can mistake these books as just like any other books in a library. No, those are mundane books. These are transcendental books. And transcendental nature of these books is they are living. Every time you read, my own example is I have read Bhagavad Gita for, I don't know now, I've forgotten now. If I count, probably it goes into hundreds of times. And every time I read Bhagavad Gita, something new is revealed to me. And I say, how is it? Because these are living books. Krishna is speaking to you directly, and he's giving you a little bit more. As you become more and more receptive, the more and more you get. And then you develop this, what I call, a taste for it.
That's an interesting aspect, that according to our consciousness, the more we grow in our spiritual life, actually we'll be able to receive more from the books. Another question that I have is that, reading is one thing, and absorbing, of course, you already mentioned that it's also the purification of heart takes place through the reading. But how do we ensure that we apply what we have read? We receive the knowledge, but then how do we apply that knowledge? Because that's, at the end, that's the goal, right? To live according to the books, the wisdom that we receive from there.
Well, see, as I said in the beginning, if you want to show your gratitude, your indebtedness to His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Prabhupada, who made an effort to give us these books, then naturally in the books, Krishna says himself in the Bhagavad Gita, "There's none more dear to me than one who preaches my glories." So if you want to become very dear to Krishna and his pure devotee, then what we got to do is share what we have been enlightened by reading Prabhupada's books, what we have achieved this in our personal realizations. You share with that. And I give this example also that if someone, say you have given an examination and you get a phone call from the examination center saying, my dear friend, I got bad news for you. Unfortunately, you failed by 3 points. And you are saddened by this news, so that you won't get a pass mark. And then you put the phone down and you feel very morose, and you kind of become introvert and sob somewhere in the corner of sadness and misery and wallow in your misery. And you don't want to share this with anybody. On the other hand, the phone call comes and says, wow, my friend, I've got good news for you. You passed 100%, and the certificate is going to be mailed to you very soon. And then you put the phone down and you go on, and you start ringing all your friends. Guess what? I passed. And you want to spread the message to everyone. So similarly, when we experience some transcendental bliss and happiness by reading these books, our spiritual awakening, what do you want to do? You want to share it with others. And this is what Prabhupada says, we are preachers. What are our preaching? We're preaching what we have realized from our own understanding from the scriptures, from associating the devotees who are also well versed in the scriptures, and then you go and preach. So the best way to keep yourself alive is to preach. The more you preach, the more you'll feel alive. And if you just read and don't share that with anyone, then what happens is that you get cobwebs in your brain and you just become a dead person. So what I describe this person as living dead. He's living, but he's dead. But when you're preaching, you want to go and meet people, tell them about Krishna, inspire them to read Prabhupada's books, and take up Krishna consciousness, awaken from the slumber. Then this is the way we can actually put our knowledge into practice. What you are gaining from reading Prabhupada's books, you preach. The more you preach, the more and more you will want to read, because then you want to preach more. You don't want to come to a point where you preach for half an hour and that's it. I don't have anything more to say because up there is all empty now. I've got to go back and refill it. So the more you read, the more knowledge you have, the more you share, the more you preach. And once you start getting into this cycle of preaching and reading, then it will be a continuous loop. You don't want to come out of that, because it is what is going to bring you what we call ananda, or what everybody is looking for, this transcendental bliss, happiness. This is where you're going to get your happiness from, not from material sense objects. Those are temporary, but this is everlasting, continuous. So read and preach, and then you'll get into the loop and be one happy person.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I don't know, is there anything like a last message, something you like to address our viewers in this regard?
I would say, with folded hands, with utmost humility, please show your gratitude and indebtedness to Srila Prabhupada by reading his books. If you read his books, then I think that you're making some effort to show your gratitude. Because in any aspect in this world, if we are recipient of something good, then we should show gratitude to the person whom we have received from. And in this case, it is spiritual awakening by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. So we have to show our gratitude to Srila Prabhupada. That is the only thing we can give Srila Prabhupada from our side, is our gratitude. And that gratitude comes in the form of, respecting and reading his books. So please read these books. These books are your way back to the spiritual world. You abandon these books, you will be going birth after birth after birth in this material world. Please don't do that. Take advantage. Prabhupada has given this mercy to us. Take it and then distribute it. And of course, as I said, reading is one aspect, but once you read, like myself, I am a living experience that I received this book from a devotee. He persisted on giving me this Isopanishad. I didn't want it, but he insisted, and I am still thankful to that person. I don't know who he is or where he is right now, but in my heart, I have gratitude towards him that he actually was the instrumental person who awakened me and giving me the book. So two things we must do as member of this society to show our gratitude to Srila Prabhupada and Krishna is that read the books and distribute the books. Do these things, your life will become perfect. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Atmanivedana Maharaj, for this
Hare Krishna.
encouragement. So let's all read Srila Prabhupada's books.
And distribute them.
Jai. Srila
Hare
Prabhupada ki jai. Hare
Yeah.
Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare